Michael during the break. Nick, if you would please come up. Nick Alexopoulos is an emeritus professor in computer science and electrical engineering from UC Irvine with a broad fascination with all things ancient, scientific, and technological. And he's got about, I think, 20 minutes of discussion to give you a broader context for where this and other machines came from. So Nick, all yours.
Thank you. This is, and then moving forward. Okay. Thank you. How did it all begin? Well, because of the 20 minutes, I will be very quick, but I will cover at least 20,000 years. Always, the simple folk, like the sponge divers, are in simple clothes, and the government officials, of course, take all the credit at the end of the day, at the top. And I wanted to just demonstrate, this is from the National Museum of Athens. It's a book, and it has this picture. And I want to challenge you to think about, what do you see? I see pure technology. Some of you will say, well, I see technology right there. Some of you will say, I see art. And part of the mix is that the word technology comes from the ancient or modern Greek word technologia, techni and logos, where the meaning actually is, I make useful things with logic analysis with aesthetic value. So, in a nutshell, this is amazing technology as well, because imagine the science or engineering of metallurgy to do such a kind of a statue, and I'll get back to this later. But how did it all begin? And now we'll take a little digression. It all started this morning for all of us when we got up and get ready to come here. We went through a very simple routine. We do this every day. We ate breakfast, we got ready, we got dressed. Maybe because we have become a little bit robotic, we had to touch our cell phone, see who sent us a message. We sent messages, we looked at pictures, etc. We got in the car, maybe we used GPS, and we came here. What a beautiful routine. We go through this every day for different goals. In this routine, we touch a huge number of objects, things. We touch them consciously, subconsciously. It's our life. We never think how those were made. Who amongst you is honest enough to tell me that one day you looked at your fork and you said, who is the engineer back then who figured out how to make this fork? And what about the engineer who made an assembly line to make millions of these so they're affordable and cheap? When you dial a number to call on your cell phone, do you ever think, how is this happening? What's in that little thing, the cell phone? We hear about chips. They have billions of transistors in an area smaller than your little nail. So you type the numbers, they convert into some electrical currents, signals, they go to the antenna, there the current piles up, bubbles out into a wave, electromagnetic wave, which spreads in space with the speed of light. It touches millions of cell phones, but it's only yours that receives that number. Magic. You never think about engineers. They're always in the background. You don't know that every working engineer creates 7 to 10 non-engineering, well-paying jobs. It is the economy, because all the things you see, you use, go through some simple or extremely sophisticated engineering. We say we are the most powerful country in the world. What do we mean by that? We mean we have the best weapons. Who makes those? It's all engineers. What am I trying to say? We never worry about our future. We're ahead of everyone. So did my ancestors. What you saw is only one device that we were fortunate enough to find. Otherwise, we would believe what I first heard when I came to this country, 1959, as a 17-year-old at the University of Michigan. Ancient Greeks had philosophy, had theater, blah, blah, art, architecture. No technology, no gears. How do you respond if you have no proof? So that's the proof. The other thing they never thought is they were so superior that they would exist forever. Yet, what you see in the Roman shipwreck is a standard process of the destruction of the ancient Greek civilization, which took several centuries, and it was obliterated. And therefore, we had to rediscover all this technology, the science, the mathematics, and so on. Can it happen to us? How do we store our knowledge? If what happened to them happens to us, it will take at least 10,000 years to recover what we know today. Think about that. So, I will very quick. Technology always defines our ages. We start with Stone Age, we go Bronze Age. Today, it's the Information Age. Now, I will say very few things, and please don't misunderstand me. I don't want to insult anyone, but I will start a little bit with religion, ancient Greek religion, the way I understand it. They believed in one God, known and unknown. It always has a duality. Known because of everything they see. Unknown because of the vastness of the universe. And of course, they didn't have all the devices we have today to study the cosmos. They also believed this is one entity is powerful, the most powerful. But it cannot only be good. Because if it's so powerful and only good, how does it allow evil to happen? Earthquakes in Nepal, for example. Or people killing one another. So therefore, that entity is both good and evil. Then they humanize that entity for all the human faults and goods we see. And they have layers of gods in their pantheon. And the Olympian gods, each represents an entity of this one, known and unknown. So those Olympian gods, 6 men, 6 women, and there you see a lesbian woman and a homosexual man, and also a god of technology. Hephaestus in Greek, Vulcan in Latin. Technology was praised in the society, even though there was no writing. It was through poetry, and we have Homer's poetry until it was written down. And in the Iliad, as well as the Odyssey, you have more than 800 praises, exaltations of technology. What were the industries? Let's say from the mythological times, we jump to the Hellenic period or the classical period, the glory of Athens and so on. We don't have time to go through details, so I'll be very quick, but had amazing shipping technologies. Assembly lines to make ships, warships, commercial ships. Shipping was the way of communication around the world for them. Weapon manufacture, mining, the mines of Lavrio near Athens, where they got silver and they became a wealthy state to support all these technologies, etc. I will just spend a little bit on this beautiful temple. You know, modern scientists, engineers, mathematicians have spent over 30 years now trying to understand how this was built. And I'm not going to spend time on any details other than I will take one column. And you see the column, the diameter of the column, as you go in height, diminishes. Each of the drums or sections fits perfectly. You hardly see the line between the different parts. But that's not it only. Inside, there is a hole, vertical hole inside each drum that matches through down to the ground. Why was that hole there? When the Parthenon was reconstructed the first time, a German engineer put an iron bar through. They assumed that's what they did for stability. Well, after a few years, the marble started eroding The ancients were using lead, so it preserves the marble, but also gives elasticity during earthquakes. So they were better engineers. Now, is this technology or is it art? This is in the Museum of Delphi. What is it? Look at that. This was buried on the ground. Look at the eyes, look at the eyelashes. This is bronze. What kind of engineering or metallurgy is this? Isn't this amazing? Look at the eyes, different colors. Actually, when you look at it and you turn around, it follows you. So what did the ancient Greeks strive for? Perfection. Everything they did. The competitiveness amongst themselves was perfection. And if you read through their scholarly works, you can find a way of explaining that, and I derived a simple equation. Excellence plus harmony. Excellence is easier than harmony, because harmony means not only within yourself, but also with other people. So that's why perfection is not reachable in reality. However, if you look at this statue, and so many others, like the Antikythera youth we saw in the beginning, it's amazing technology, it's amazing art. Now, we lost so much because of all the distractions. We were systematic. I'll go through them very quickly, and I can answer questions later. We didn't know anything about this man. Where is Cyrene? Well, he was mentioned in one of Plato's dialogues. The title is the Theaetetus. Theaetetus was an ancient Athenian mathematician who was fantastic, but there is nothing left of his work other than what we found from others. Theodorus was a mathematician in Cyrene, Kyrene, in the called Pentapolis, the 5 Greek cities. Did you know that today's Benghazi was a Greek city called Phereniki? You don't. That's what I mean by everything had been destroyed and buried. There, you see ancient Greek ruins. It was one of the first religious uprisings against pagans, Greeks, that destroyed this, and Romans rebuilt the temple. Now, Theodorus did amazing work, apparently, the little that we have being able to understand, on studying irrational numbers. And he studied them in a way that I can explain later through geometry, but look at that. This is a book in 1993 by an American professor of mathematics. Imagine, 2,500 years later, people are studying the mathematics of Theodorus. So what have we lost? These are the continuous equations of Theodorus. I have given this here, the spiral of Theodorus and the spiral of Archimedes, because I'll come back to the spiral of Archimedes later. Now, we go to the Hellenistic period very quickly. It starts when Alexander the Great died. To 415 AD, it's a very critical year, because the first woman scientist mathematician was murdered by Christian monks, chopped up and burned, because she was still a pagan. Ptolemy was one of Alexander's generals. He took over Egypt and brought his body there and buried it, and still don't know exactly where. But he was amazing in terms of creating an amazing empire eventually, the Alexandrian Empire, but also because he created the Library and Museum of Alexandria, which I refer to as the first research university in the history of mankind. And I spelled here the word museum in the Greek way, but then how did he do it? He invited Demetrius of Phaleron, unknown man, who was the governor of Athens for 10 years. He was a student in the Aristotelian way of thinking, and he is the one who was the intellectual founder of the museum and the Loya Library. And this is presumably what he looks like. Phaleron is a suburb of Athens by the sea. Now, I will go through this because we don't have time. These are full lectures by themselves. In the Library of Alexandria, we have the development of amazing science, mathematics, astronomy, technology, and medicine. I will not touch medicine, but the first anatomy was done in Alexandria. The first examination of the brain was in Alexandria. The first understanding of the women body was done in Alexandria, because the first time that human beings started anatomy, meaning to touch and open up human beings to understand how we function. The Ctesivios were studying pneumatics, and that is the combination of fluid mechanics and air pressure. He created an amazing musical organ, and who would believe it? He was the son of a barber, and here's the organ, a reconstruction, where you needed somebody to pump air, and the musician was playing the valves. The musical organ has pumps, pistons, intake valves, inverted cisterns, and pressure chambers, etc. It had what we have in cars today. Later on, I can read to you an analysis of this by a very famous professor of mechanical engineering and fluid mechanics, if we have time later, not in this part of the talk. Here is a proof that this was actually done. And this is in a museum in northern Greece, a musical organ from 150 BC. And I hope somebody like Michael takes this up to really do a thorough analysis of the mechanical parts and the brilliance of this machine. Now, I had given lectures on this topic more than 10 years ago. There were audiences of this size. People were encouraging me to write a book, but somebody saved me. I was beginning to write a book. This is a book written by an Italian professor of mathematics and philology, The Forgotten Revolution, How Science Was Born in 300 BC and Why It Had to Be Reborn. It's an amazing book where he systematically shows the science and technology that disappeared because of religious fanaticism. Here's another book, the Archimedes Codex. I will spend a few minutes with this. The authors are Reviel Nedge, is a professor at Stanford of archaeology and mathematics, the ancient mathematics. So, what is this? This was a prayer book, a Christian prayer book. Somebody saw in Constantinople, today's Istanbul, 1000 AD. But he noticed that under the Christian prayers, there was something else written in ancient Greek. That book disappeared from Istanbul, today's name. Then it was seen in a monastery in Lebanon. Then it disappeared from Lebanon. Then it was found in the possession of a French family, who actually sold it in an auction in New York about 16 or so years ago, anonymously, to an American. He bought it, he gave it to a museum in Baltimore. And the funds to analyze it with three-dimensional imaging to see what is written under the Christian prayers. And under the Christian prayers is one of Archimedes' original works. Under a prayer to the dead, there is the definition of science, exactly the definition we use today. And then proving that he was the inventor of integral calculus, that he established probability, because he was studying how many particles of sand are there in the universe. And he was a phenomenal engineer, incredible engineer. And his mathematics was incredibly sophisticated for the time. So we have now modern proofs of these things, because when the ancient Greek world was destroyed, how would people write? What they did is they took ancient Greek texts, which were using vellum, animal skin, which was invented in Pergamum, today's Bodrum in Turkey. And they erased the ancient texts and wrote Christian prayers. If the writing was this way, they erased it and they wrote the vertical way. Fortunately, we found this, just like the mechanism. Hopefully, we'll find a lot more evidence of the sophistication of that society. And remember, they never thought that they would be destroyed. Think about that. Now, first, the destruction was when Caesar was trying to conquer Alexandria to support Cleopatra, whose brother was actually fighting her. They say that part of the library museum, or at least the books near the harbor, were burned. But Emperor Theodosius ordered everything pagan destroyed. Libraries were burned, temples were destroyed. That's why you see statues without arms or noses. It was a superiority over the pagans, the ancient Greeks. This is by modern Greeks who became Christian, or other Christians. Then Emperor Justinian closed Plato's Academy. Imagine, it was functioning for 8 centuries. Also, Theodosius stopped the Olympic Games. Then the Arab conquest finished everything off. And there is this discussion. The general who took over Alexandria sent a message to his boss, what shall he do with whatever books he found in the libraries? And that was the argument. And I was burn them, they're useless. Now, there is also an argument between these two authors. One is an Egyptian, and he argues, oh, this didn't happen. Yes, Arab sources are telling us, Muslim sources are telling us that this happened by Arabs. But these sources are a few centuries later than the event. Whereas the Italian, Luciano Canfora, is arguing that it was not Caesar that destroyed the library first, because another historian, Strabo, was there 2 centuries later and was describing the library. Now, this is the first woman scientist, mathematician, who, in the fanaticism of the Christian world, in some ways, when I look back, it is Rome's fault, because there's amazing persecution against the early Christians. You remember that? So when Christians became large in numbers, they dished it back. And it was really vicious. Anyway, she was still teaching the ancient Greek way, not through Christianity. And she had students who were Christians, Jews, as well as pagans. Imagine it took all these centuries to have another woman scientist. In between, intelligent women were burnt on the stake. Imagine that a movie was made in Spain a few years ago about her. And imagine that the church in Spain managed to make sure it is not shown in Spain. Now, what was she saying to be killed? To know one religion is not to know that one. Wow. Superstition consists of one thing: faith to one religion to the exclusion of others. To know one philosophy is to know none. To rule by fettering the mind through fear of punishment in another world is just as base as the use of force. Because ancient Greeks did not believe in hell. They believed in the underworld where everybody goes, sinners and good people and so on. So anyway, the Bishop of Alexandria, who essentially ordered her death, became a saint. I'm showing this to challenge a little bit Michael. and many others. And I will discuss this a little bit more. This kind of shape is actually from 20,000 years BC. And you see it periodically in various cultures, this double spiral. And it has to do with the calendar, how primitive people were counting months and a season and a full year. Well, a young engineer by the name Senghua Yun derived the equations exactly for the calendar that Michael showed us. These are Archimedean spirals, and these are the equations to reproduce those spirals. It may have nothing to do with the actual calendar of the mechanism, but I thought I'll throw it there for fun. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.